Hello, sports fans, and welcome to the inaugural podcast of our new show, Backyard Sportscast. I am your host, Dirty Jake, and with me, my co-host, Danny, will be guiding you through the world of athletics. We hope to grace the world with our smooth tones, light banter, and of course, our wealth of sports knowledge and opinions. So, what will you hear on Backyard Sportscast? What's our credibility and our resume? Well, we didn't major in journalism, we didn't play professional sports, but after my good run of high school football and track and field, I did play a long, grueling season of football at Jacksonville University, a Division I AA football team. If you're the fan. Danny over here also did play at a prestigious intramural sports team at UCF called Undrafted Yet Again. Very impressive stuff. So I guess you could say we're pretty well-rounded in this industry. Today's going to be a little bit different, though. We're doing a special preseason college football special. We're going to break down the Power 5 conferences and the AAC because we like them. And we'll go over playoff predictions, Heisman hopefuls, and some other stuff. So, anything else to add, Danny?
No, I mean, just to give you a little background for this college preview show, since it is a little different from what we're going to be doing from week to week. We pulled a few of our friends to get their predictions, analysis, a little bit of information, just so we didn't have just our two opinions on the subject. We got a little bit of diversity there.
Yeah, we brought in some extra experts.
Right, we've got Joe Campamore, we've got Travis Riganti, and Frank Ambrosino as our three friends. You'll hear from Joe a little bit later. He's got a segment coming up during this preview show. So if you're ready, Jake, I think we'll hop into the American Athletic Conference. Let's start with the East Division. Who you got?
All right, so for the East Division, definitely got my Bulls here, USF. They're pretty impressive. You know, Quentin Flowers, he's a man. I think that they're still going to have a very dominant offense despite the loss of their running back. The only thing that I worry about is their defense, honestly. If they can just produce 1 or 2 3-and-outs this season, I'll be very happy, and I think that'll really help them out.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything you're saying there. They do have a very weak schedule. I think the toughest team they play is Illinois. So running the table is a real possibility for the Bulls this year if they can beat the likes of their division rivals UCF and, Temple they've had trouble with in recent years. But if they can get by them in September, it should be an easy run all the way down to the November part of their schedule. It gets a little tough with Houston, Tulsa, and at UCF.
So if they do run it, what do you think that does for them as far as being ranked? They're starting off the season ranked, which is pretty impressive for them. But how do you think that looks?
Yeah, that can only benefit them. They are ranked, like you said, in the coaches' poll to start the season out. With the easy schedule is not going to do them any favors in the committee's eyes. So if they're say 8-0, 9-0 when the first rankings come out, they'll probably be top 10 in the coaches and AP poll, but when the playoff committee gets done deciding, they could be outside the top 10, honestly.
Maybe in that 12 to 15 range.
Yeah, I think that if they do run the table, they're a lock for the New Year's Six Bowl from the best team in the rest of the conferences.
The lesser conferences.
Outside of the Power 5, right? But I don't think it's going to do them any favors. They didn't schedule anybody this year. I honestly don't think they were anticipating being this good. And 13-0 is a real possibility. I just don't think it's going to get them into the playoff.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Not an AAC team. I was talking to some of my buddies last season, and I was basically saying that USF would have to go, 1 or no loss seasons for about 2 years before they can get considered for a playoff. So their playoff run kind of started at the beginning of last season.
Do you like anybody else in the East?
There's UCF. I don't think they're going to pose too much of a threat to USF. They do have Frost, which, he's a great coach, so he can make things happen. But, besides that, Temple, like you said, is going to be a threat, but I don't see anybody else to talk about besides UCF.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you there as well. Outside of the non-conference for USF, they don't really have a tough division to deal with as well if UCF's their toughest game. UCF, in my opinion, will probably be fighting for a bowl bid this year. You mentioned Scott Frost, new coach. He really turned the team around 2 years ago. This team was 0-12, I believe, maybe 3 years ago. But he's come on the scene. They've done really well. They lost a ton off their defense last year. I just don't think they can compete with Quentin this year. Even if USF has to replace everybody else on their offense, it's just a tough job to corral somebody like that who's got that much speed. So, unfortunately, I don't think this is UCF's year. Me being an alum, it sucks to say that, but USF's got the conference and this division on lock for me this year.
Go Bulls.
Yeah,
My alma mater.
Yeah. Now for the West, I'm looking Houston.
And I'm looking Memphis.
Yeah, so we do disagree a little bit there. There's Navy, which is a third party to all this with the option. You never know what they're going to do. For me, Tom Herman's leaving the team, but Tom Herman's players are still there. I don't think it's going to be as big of a dip as people are anticipating. I know the preseason, when they did their media day, the media picked Memphis to win the West. They're going along with you. I'm still going to stick with Houston and Ed Oliver on that defensive line. No Greg Ward, but somebody can step up and fill that role. He wasn't the greatest passer in the world.
I don't know. I just don't think that team's ready. I think Memphis went through a lot of growing pains last year. They're a pretty developed team this year, I'm thinking. So I think that'll be enough for them to get over to the championship.
Yeah, I agree with you. Riley Ferguson's a great quarterback at Memphis. He's, there's no real Heisman. There's no real Heisman hopefuls from the conference. I don't see any playoff contenders either, because even if USF goes 13-0, like I said, probably not going to do them any good.
Yeah, I agree. But I guess that'll wrap it up for the AAC. Are you all good with that?
Yeah, that's fine by me.
So, let's move on over to the ACC, the conference that matters.
Okay. Do you want me to lead or you want to go?
Yeah, I know you're a big FSU fan, so I'll let you go ahead and, take the wheel on this one.
All right. Yeah, as you alluded to, I do have a rooting interest in this conference. I am a Florida State fan. I do think the Atlantic is really deep this year, though. 4 deep, to be more specific. I don't think Syracuse, although they returned 20 starters, I don't think they're going to make much noise. But in the Atlantic, you've got Florida State, you've got Clemson, the returning national champ, you've got Louisville with...
Please say it right.
Okay. You've got Louisville.
Lul.
Yeah, okay. You've got Louisville with the returning Heisman winner, Lamar Jackson, and you've got NC State, which is my pick to be a surprise team this year. I think they crack the top 25 and make some noise there.
I think you're a fool.
Well, who you have in the Atlantic?
Kind of the first 3 teams you talked about. FSU. I don't think you need to talk about another team outside of FSU, Clemson, and Louisville. Who cares that FSU lost Alvin? They still got Francois. They have great tools on offense. If Jimbo can create a good receiver, I think Francois is good enough to make his receivers good. That's what any good quarterback does. He makes the receivers better. But if they can find some hands, offense should be fine. They have a good defense. Players like Derwin James is on there. They're going to be good to go. I'll let you kind of take more of that analysis on FSU, but I think they got the Atlantic no problem. Clemson, they lost their star quarterback. I think they'll struggle a little bit, but they're still good enough to definitely, be in the conversation. Then there's Louisville, which Lamar Jackson, Heisman winner, quarterbacks like that, I think they get figured out after a season. Once the teams have seen them once, have a whole season worth of film to watch on them, find out what they do. I don't know if Lamar has that pre-snap reading ability to really change it up this season, so I don't think he's going to have nearly as good of a season as he did last year. But, they can still be in the conversation for sure.
Yeah. So who do you have coming out of that side?
FSU.
You got FSU? All right. I have the same. And I'll tell you why. I think Cam Akers is going to be phenomenal in his first year. They've got Khalil Laybourne behind him. I don't think he's going to see the field that much with Jock Patrick in front of him. Jock did pretty well when Dalvin was out last year. He's a different kind of runner than Cam is. We'll see what happens when they get on the field, but I think Cam Akers is going to take that starting running back job, and he's going to perform. He's probably won't put up Dalvin numbers his first year, but I think he's going to go over 1,000, maybe 8 or 9 touchdowns. We'll see. Clemson, like you said, they lost Deshaun Watson. They also lost Wayne Gallman and Mike Williams, running back and receiver respectively. And on the defensive side of the ball, they lost their captain. So there's a lot of holes to fill with Clemson. There's a lot of unknowns. We don't know what's going to happen. But if they get their quarterback situation figured out, the defense should carry them through most of their schedule. They do get Auburn week 2, which is going to be a big test with their new quarterback, Jared Stidham. But I think if Clemson can pull that game out, Clemson, Florida State, it's going to be for the Atlantic again this year. Louisville, I see a drop-off. Lamar Jackson's probably not going to do that again. 51 total touchdowns is just unreal. Dual-threat quarterbacks, however, year 2, people have started to figure out how to defend against them. I don't think he's good enough as a passer to keep that up. And then you've got NC State. They're strong on the D-line. I don't think their offense is phenomenal, but I think their defense can keep it low-scoring enough, put enough pressure on these young quarterbacks to make a difference. Francois, if he stays healthy for Florida State, probably going to lead them to the playoff. They do have a few tough games, but
yes. Speaking of tough games, just think about this. I mean, Jimbo's been prepping them to go up against Bama week 1.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine the kind of stuff they've been working on. I think if you look at, obviously teams get better as the season progresses. But I think FSU will probably enter the beginning of the season as the most mid-season form type of team because of the level of practice they're probably going to take on a team like Bama. So I think that's really going to put them out ahead as far as maturing throughout the season over the other teams.
Yeah, we'll go more in depth on that game in, maybe next week or 2 weeks from now. But I do agree with you. I think that both teams are going to have to come in mid-season form because this game, although everybody's saying it doesn't matter, the loser can still make it to the... Yeah, every game matters. Jimbo and Nick Saban aren't telling their teams, this game doesn't matter, you can lose and still make the playoff. They're telling their team to get ready and go out there and beat the other team. Because to beat Alabama is going to send a message for Florida State week 1. Alabama, they come in, they beat Florida State, people are going to stop questioning them. Usually what happens after the first week every year, and everybody's obviously going to have them making it all the way through to the playoff again.
There's also just that element of bragging rights. There's a lot of people that say the ACC is better than the SEC and vice versa, so there's a lot riding in that aspect as well, which, they're young players. I'm sure there's a little bit of that going on too.
Yeah, and like I talked about a little bit earlier, you got Clemson, Auburn week 2, so a lot of ACC, SEC matchups early on in the season. Bragging rights, conference bragging rights. A lot of people saying the ACC surpassed the SEC last year. I'm sure the SEC would disagree.
Oh, well.
Big Ten's got, an argument as well. But,
That's cute.
It's going to be a great game no matter what. Week 1, I'm ready to see it. And Florida, Michigan. It's going to be a great season. Elsewhere in the ACC, though, on the Coastal side, it's not quite the same story. You've got Miami, you've got Virginia Tech. I don't think either team gets through the season with less than 2 losses. So I don't think you're going to see a Coastal team make it to the playoff.
No.
For me, I have Miami taking it over Virginia Tech just because I think they beat them this year. Virginia Tech does have West Virginia early, and then they play each other in November, I believe, is when they have their game. I've got Miami taking it at home, and that's going to push them to the lead in that side of the conference and probably to the conference championship.
Yeah, that's the thing about Miami. I mean, I have them winning the Coastal. They just seem like a very well balanced team. Like all their position groups, they're pretty set. So that's what I like about them. It's been a while since you got people being excited about like a legitimately good Miami team. So I think this is going to be their year. I mean, the year to win the Coastal. Like you said, I don't think anybody from the Coastal side is going to go to the playoffs, but they're going to have a good year this year. And my other team that was worth noting, in my opinion, was Georgia Tech. Mainly because of lack of competition, I think, in that side of the conference. But, I think the team can shoot for a solid 15 to 25 spot in the top 25 by the end of the season. I think they usually do, middle of the pack kind of thing.
Yeah.
They do have what I think is probably one of the best running backs in the ACC in Mills.
Okay.
So, I think that'll help them out, especially with that kind of offense.
Yeah, I think that game's going to be a big run-heavy thing. It's going to be whoever's defensive line can get more pressure, the linebackers at the second level who can make more tackles. It's going to be an important game. November 4th in Miami. Keep that one on the radar. Speaking of radar, my surprise or under-the-radar player in the conference is the running back we've been talking about, Mark Walton. He ran for 1,100 yards last year, 14 touchdowns, averaged 5.3 yards a carry. Those are pretty solid numbers. They're not going to win you a Heisman, but they could win you a Conference Player of the Year, and they could get your team to a conference championship. We'll see what happens. Other than that, in the Heisman race, you've got Lamar Jackson from the ACC. Francois, maybe, if he can up his touchdown total and stay healthy. But Lamar, he's got to be...
I see it.
He's got to be the top 5 coming in because he won it last year, but like we talked a little bit about earlier, I think there's going to be a decline there. The defenses have kind of figured him out. LSU basically gave everyone a game plan on how to stop him last year in the bowl game. We'll see what happens.
Shall we move on to the West Coast?
Yeah, let's move on. You are a Stanford fan, and next up we've got the Pac-12, so go for it.
Yeah. Speaking of Stanford, I mean, David Shaw's got this. I think he's a great coach. He has a lot of love for that offense, if you catch my drift, Danny.
Yeah.
Love. I think that should fill the void that McCaffrey left. On the real, though, I think that running back, I really don't think we're going to see that much of a lack of presence that McCaffrey brought. I think their running game is going to be just fine. They have this new quarterback that everyone seems very high on with Christ. I think he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks they've had in the last few offenses. And then they also have, they used our tight ends a lot. I think Schultz, he's a pretty good veteran on that team. He's going to get a lot of catches in there. Pretty decent receiver still there as well. They're just such a fun offense to watch, and I think they're going to do fine. I still think Washington takes the North, and that pains me. But Stanford is very good at losing a game or two that they shouldn't lose from one of the lesser teams in the conference. So I think they lose one or two of those, like a UCLA type of game or Colorado State kind of loss.
Okay. Yeah, my thoughts on Stanford are, they're a solid team, like you said, with your silly little pun. They do have Bryce Love that is supposed to be the next Christian McCaffrey. We'll see if he lives up to that billing because he was an incredible player while he was there at Stanford, obviously. I think Keller Christ is just not good enough to win you the division. I know the defense is going to come ready to play. They do every year. The offense really needs something other than a Bryce Love that maybe could be a Christian McCaffrey, though, because Christian McCaffrey also brought it in special teams. Bryce Love maybe can bring it in special teams. It's really just an unknown with him. And that offense, they may not score a lot of points. And if you don't score a lot of points, you're not going to win 10 games. I don't have them winning the North either. I think Washington with Jake Browning is a little too strong. But I do tend to agree that they'll win probably somewhere between 8, 9. They can get to 10 if the offense shows up. But I think the defense will be good like it is every year.
Under Shaw's tenure, though, I think they've had worse offenses than this one coming in. And Shaw has averaged, I think, like 10.2 wins per season since he's been there. So I think they'll find a way to get a 10-win season again. 9, I wouldn't say 8 or 9. I'd probably say 9 to 11, around that range. They'll figure something out, I think.
Right, but you've got Washington in the North, as do
Yeah.
I. McCaffrey didn't get it done while he was there. And if Bryce Love is a discount Christian McCaffrey,
Yeah.
I don't see how he's going to elevate them to that next step that they need to take.
The only thing that concerns me about Washington is that shoulder surgery that Browning had. Mm-hmm. I always get concerned when a quarterback has to undergo surgery and see if they come back, just as good as they were before. So I think that's something that's a little bit questionable. But, they played awesome last year, and I think Peterson plans to deliver. Expectations are pretty high for them.
Let me read you off Washington's non-conference schedule. They start out the year at Rutgers. They get Montana at home, and then they get Fresno State at home. My question with those 3 games is, which team are they not going to put 50 on? Because I'm thinking, when I look at this, Rutgers lost, it seemed like, to everyone by 70 last year in the Big Ten. Montana's a D2 school, and Fresno State out of the Mountain West hasn't been the same for 5-6 years. So for me, that non-conference is so bad that they're going to have to almost run the show here, because if they don't run through and get to 12-0 going into the conference championship, I don't know if the committee's really going to like that non-conference schedule they put up. I can't see it with a D2 school and a 2-10 school, how the committee thinks that a non-conference scheduling, which they have taken into account for these last few years, I don't see how it's going to be strong enough. But if they can get their 12-0, 11-1, there's always an outside chance. They are going to have to go through some mediocre Pac-12 teams, the Colorados, the UCLAs, the Oregons. They have a tough game at Stanford late on in the year, and they get Washington State to end the year in their rivalry game, which is always a tough game, but it does set up favorably for Jake Browning in Washington this year. Myles Gaskin is also a very under-the-radar running back for them. I see them coming out of the North pretty easily this year.
Yeah.
For the South, I've got USC. Who do you have?
This is going to sound kind of contradicting to what I think about USC, but I have USC in the South.
Okay.
But I'll also say I think that there's a really good potential for the Pac-12 to kind of self-destruct themselves in the sense that I think there's going to be a lot of teams beating each other up.
Okay.
So USC might still take up the South, but I think they're not going to do as good as people are saying they're going to do. And I can touch more on that a little bit later. I want to talk about my bust of the year. I think that's going to be USC. But I do have them winning the South. And Colorado is my second team that I could also see.
Okay. Yeah, I see where you're coming from. USC, they do return Sam Darnold. Everybody's in love with Sam Darnold right now.
Yeah.
But they do only return 5 starters on offense. They do get their starting running back, Ronald Jones the second, I believe, maybe the third, I don't know. But they do return their running back. They return Darnold. The defense is a question mark. They weren't great last year. They kind of got pushed around in a few games last year.
Yeah.
And after Darnold came in, he was able to outscore other teams, but it's not like the defense was holding teams down. They were still giving up a ton of points. So with those players returning, the defense, being a question mark, I will say the thing in their favor is the schedule. The schedule is pretty easy, kind of similar to how Washington sets up. They get Stanford week 2, Texas week 3, which we don't know what Texas we're going to get this year. But in their division, they don't have anyone. Their toughest competition in the division is UCLA, who won 4 games last year. So I don't see a way that USC manages to lose this division as long as Darnold stays healthy. Obviously, they're my pick in the South. I think that the game between USC and Washington in the conference championship should be to get into the playoff. However, if both teams come in with 2 losses, there's a little gray area there, because then if you have a Big 12 champ with 1, you never know what's going to happen. That being said, I've got USC Washington, and I've got USC advancing out of the Pac-12.
Ooh.
Do you have any other teams in the Pac-12 you're interested in?
I kind of wrote a little bit about Washington State. It's kind of impressive what Leach has done with such little NFL-worthy talent. Not destined to be a conference championship or champion or anything like that, but they are worthy of being one of my trolls in this conference. I can see them kind of playing a part in that whole self-destruction theory I have. And then the other one is Oregon. I don't think they're ready for any considerations this season, but if you consider what Taggart did with his bus at USF, getting everyone on there, it took him about 3 seasons, but he turned it around. So I think he can do some work with Oregon in about 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, I love Oregon, but I agree with you. I don't think they're ready for this stage quite yet. Washington State, all I can really say about them, Luke Falk is phenomenal. I love watching him throw. 70% completion percentage last year. That is incredible, especially for somebody who throws the ball that much. 4,500 yards, 38 touchdowns in 13 games, only 11 interceptions. He would be on my Heisman list. However, he plays for Washington State, and unless you're throwing for like 50 touchdowns in an air raid offense, you're probably not going to get any Heisman votes. So, Washington State, they could give some teams a run for their money. They do play USC and Washington this year, so they could play spoiler like you were mentioning. But outside of that, I don't see really much to do for them this year. That's all I've got for the Pac-12, if you've got any last words.
No, let's move on.
We've got the Big 12 next.
Ooh.
Who do you have in the Big 12? You got Oklahoma, you got Oklahoma State. If you say anybody else, your opinion doesn't matter.
Oklahoma?
All right.
Not much to say about the Big 12 for me. They have a lot of experienced weapons on offense. It seems like they resolved some of their cornerback probs. Baker Mayfield.
Right. Baker Mayfield.
That's really all I got to say about them, as long as other teams in this conference don't outshine them, they could see a playoff berth if the cards are right.
Yeah, the Big 12, a little bit of a different format this year with the conference championship. Oklahoma State are the overwhelming favorites to get there. Texas, you don't know what team you're going to get this year. Shane Buechele, he's kind of a wild card. He's decent, but he's not the top tier quarterback that everybody wants him to be. Baker Mayfield, obviously at Oklahoma, is what you want your quarterback to be in the NCAA. He set the efficiency record last year. Tom Herman at Texas, we'll see what he can do. I predict maybe a bowl game for them this year, but that's about as high as the ceiling is for them. TCU is going to be kind of in that same route. For me, the Big 12 is a league of kind of mediocrity this year.
Yeah.
Kansas State, TCU, Texas Tech, West Virginia, all in the 6 to 8 win range. Don't know what's going to happen at Baylor with all their issues.
So, let's go ahead and move on to the Big 10, where it really just kind of... Actually, there's some good teams that you could talk about in this conference. Why don't you break it off?
All right, starting in the Big 10 East, I have Ohio State. I know we're going to have a little bit of a discussion on this here in a second. But I've got Ohio State in the East, Wisconsin in the West. I don't think Wisconsin plays a difficult team all year long. They get Michigan out of the East, and that is it. They don't get Ohio State. They don't get Penn State. They should walk through their schedule. If they come out of the West at 12-0, I think it's going to be tough for the committee to keep them out. But I want to put them in the same breath as USF, in which case they don't play anybody, so why would they get in? The only saving grace for them, they'd have to probably beat a top 10 team in Ohio State or Penn State or possibly even Michigan in the conference championship in order to get into the playoff. But I think it's very possible that they'll be 12-0 going into that game.
Yeah, that's kind of the way I sum up Wisconsin. It's a team that looks very all right with a bunch of games against teams that aren't very all right.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, I think it's going to boil down to Penn State and Ohio State, and I think Penn State's going to end up going to the playoffs. I think whoever wins this conference goes to the playoffs. Okay. I think it's Penn State.
I agree with you there. And like I said, I've got Ohio State. If you want to get into that, we can, because I don't really see anybody else of merit in this conference. Michigan's there.
Yeah.
I love Jim Harbaugh. I love what he's done there, but they're returning 5 starters from a team last year. I think they lost something like 43 seniors off their team. It's unreal, the amount of experience they lost last year. This is Harbaugh's team now. We'll see what he can do, but it's going to be a young team this year, and I don't think that they can repeat their 10-win season from last year.
No.
I think everybody's going to be rooting, a different part of the Big Ten, but I think everybody's going to be rooting for Northwestern this year. If their quarterback Clayton Thorson can keep it up, 58.6 completion percentage, 3,100 yards, 22 touchdowns in 13 games last year. He was a freshman, I believe, but I'll have to double check that. Northwestern made a bowl last year. Their basketball team also making it to the tournament for the first time in forever. I think just everybody loves to root for the underdog. So we'll see if Northwestern can surprise some people this year.
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Those smaller teams in that conference tend to have one good highlighted game when something they shouldn't. So we'll see what happens there. But now that we've saved the best for last, shall we discuss the SEC?
Yeah, this is our last conference on the docket for today. We went through the American Athletic Conference early on, and we've gone through the rest of the Power 5. So we've got the Southeastern Conference coming up.
Yeah, and Joe's starting to get a little sweaty. He's ready to enjoy this. My brother loves the SEC, Joe over here. So let's go ahead and get on.
Well, you know what? Since your brother loves the SEC, I'll let you kick it off. I know you're a Florida fan just like I'm a Florida State fan, so if you want to start with them, feel free.
Yeah, I think Florida's going to win the East, and it's not just because I think they're a good team, but I think that, who's going to stop them? It could be Georgia. That's the only other one. I think they have a lot going for them. They have a true freshman that played last year returning as a sophomore. He definitely has a Chubb, and a PlayStation to play with on offense, so I think they're going to do pretty good. And, as long as their offense does good, they can be fairly dangerous. Yes.
Right. So the people that you're mentioning here, Jacob Eason at quarterback, you've got Nick Chubb at running back, and Sonny Michel at running back, who you lovingly refer to as PlayStation. I've actually got Georgia winning the East. We could have done a debate about this, but, with it being so close to home with you in Florida, I think we stay away from that for now.
Blood would have been drawn.
Okay. Well, I've got Georgia winning 10 games this year. To me, the East is getting better, but it's still got a weakness at the bottom. Kentucky's actually a good team to run with this year as more of a surprise role. You've got the usual stuff out west, but in the East, Tennessee down year without Dobbs, or do they rebound now that they don't have him there? They're kind of a big question mark. Butch Jones obviously on the hot seat for it seems like the 6th year in a row.
What's hotter, the seat or his face that he gets when something doesn't go his way?
Couldn't tell you, but
he's a ticking time bomb.
Him and Muschamp certainly put on a show for people during the games. I think with the run game at Georgia, I think they're going to put up a lot of points. I think Eason's going to progress as typical freshmen do when they become sophomores. I think it's a team that could win 11 even if they can beat the teams out west. But I do see Alabama coming out of the West, and I don't think anybody's going to touch them in the championship game.
Yeah. I guess it really boils down to that game in Jacksonville this year between Florida and Georgia. I think it will come to that. And the reason why I think Florida has a good chance is they have so many tools set up. They always have a great defense. You don't have to worry about that. But offensively, they got the receivers. They have finally a strong, developed offensive line. I think their running backs are good. So if they can get a quarterback, which is the big question. If you don't have a good quarterback, you don't have a good team. But even if their quarterback does okay, and they have, Felipe Franks in there, it could be that transfer that came in.
Yes, Malik Zaire.
Yeah, if they do okay, I think they can run with it. I mean, if you think that Treon Harris can produce a winning season there, I mean, I think anybody who does subpar can, do some work with them too. So I think one of those quarterbacks are going to surprise us this year. I think it's been a long time coming. But either way, if they do have a good quarterback, I think they can, do some damage this year. So it's really going to have to depend on how they turn out.
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest question for the East is how is Florida going to replace their, or who is going to be their quarterback and how well is he going to do? I mean, you've got options. You've got Felipe Franks. You've got Del Rio. You've got Malik Zaire, as you mentioned. So, yeah, I'm a little worried about the secondary. They're going to get a big test week 1 in Michigan. They've already suspended Antonio Callaway, 6 other players. It's been in the news. Oof. I don't know how many chances that kid's going to get, but... McElwain has put together back-to-back East Championship seasons. I mean, they do have that going for them. That defense, like you said, is traditionally very good. I do have my concerns, but we're going to find out early on this year how good they are. Georgia also gets Notre Dame early on. It's week 2 this year.
What is Notre Dame? I mean, come on.
They're an independent. And you never know what you're going to get with them usually. They lost that year, but they pretty much replaced him last year anyway. So
they're certainly the box of chocolates of the football world.
I'm not sure what's going to happen with them.
Yeah, and that's all we have to really say for the West. Bama. They are Alabama. Saban is still the head coach there. Hurts, he's going to be pretty good. I can see them losing a game or two this year, but I think that, as long as they're early on and, non-conference losses, I think they still make it to the playoffs, but I don't think anybody's going to touch them. LSU, they lost Fournette. They might cause some issues. Even Auburn, you might make a case for, but I don't know. I think Alabama has it just easy.
I agree with the 3 teams you mentioned. I also, for whatever reason, I fall in love with Arkansas every year because of their quarterbacks. This year's no different. Austin Allen threw for 3,400 yards last year, 25 touchdowns. He did have a high interception number, 15 in 13 games, so he's got to get that down. I think they could surprise some people. LSU's got to replace Fournette, but it seems like they already have that option in Darius Geis. Danny Etling, I don't think is the answer at quarterback. I don't think he's good enough to get him past Alabama. Auburn, Jarrett Stidham's a big question mark coming from Baylor. He really threw the ball well there, but everybody throws the ball well in the Big 12. When you're going up against some of these defenses in the SEC, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. One of their receivers, John Franklin III, who was seen on Last Chance U, he transferred out just this week. I don't know what options they really have at receiver because I'm pretty sure he was penciled into the starting lineup. And Arkansas maybe upsetting a few teams this year, but you got to run with Alabama. We're going to see what kind of team they are week 1 against Florida State, but
Arkansas is probably my favorite troll team. They can always get a game in there, really mess up someone's season, hopes and dreams, crush them. I like them.
Yeah. And I think, if it's going to be anybody from the East in the playoff, they got to come in undefeated, 1 loss at most. Florida does have a decent schedule this year, so they can maybe get in with 2 losses if they're at the right time of the year and they're close games. But with Bama, I don't see them losing more than twice, and a 2-loss Bama team's probably going to get in over most of the other teams in the NCAA. So you always got to go with Bama until they prove you wrong, I guess.
Yeah. As long as Saban's there, it's Bama.
Yeah, that's really all I have for the SEC, and that's it for my conferences. You got any last words on the conferences?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about Tennessee doing anything this year. I think Dobbs was Tennessee, and he's gone now. I'll have to look for his eyebrows. South Carolina, destined for adequacy there with Muschamp. I don't see them doing anything great. They might, play a couple teams close, but yeah. And Auburn, I can see them going over LSU, but they had the potential to beat Alabama at the end of the season. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, now that we've got the conferences out of the way, all of the conferences have been previewed. We've given you our predictions on each conference. So we're going to move on to our playoff predictions. Joe Campamore is going to join us for this segment. We're going to go through our 5 We have 5 people's predictions to go through. We're going to go through them each individually, give our thoughts on them. A lot of them are similar, but we'll give our thoughts on what might happen in these scenarios and who everybody has in the Final Four. First off, we're going to start with Travis Reganti. He is not here this evening, but he has Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, and Oklahoma State all winning their conferences and getting into the playoff. Now, Oklahoma State's the one that's kind of a bit of a surprise for me here. Big 12, you would think Oklahoma, if anyone, gets in, but he's got them, in there because he thinks the Pac-12 cannibalizes itself, and he thinks USC beats Washington and knocks them out of the race in the championship game. I know that from his rankings, he had Bama and Ohio State playing in Game 1 and Florida State and Oklahoma State playing in the other semifinal. How do you guys feel about both of those matchups? Who do you think comes out on top?
Definitely Bama. Actually, not if it's Bama and Ohio State. Really depends on how Bama plays the other teams this year, but I think Bama should come out on top, especially since I think Penn State is up there instead of Ohio State.
Right.
But I think FSU should dominate Oklahoma State.
Okay, so you would have Bama and Florida State in the final. Who do you got winning it all between those two?
That would be a really good game, since it would be a rematch.
It would.
Yeah. I don't think, especially if Florida State wins, week 1, I don't think you beat Saban twice.
Okay.
So I'd go with Bama.
That's fair. I don't tend to disagree with you there. I think Florida State would have the upper hand against Oklahoma State, probably going favored by a touchdown or so in that game. Ohio State Bama's interesting to me as well. I don't think Jalen Hurts is great. I think he's a good quarterback. I think he struggles throwing the ball a lot, and he struggles throwing the ball down the field a lot. But if they can dink and dunk and run with Scarborough all over the field, maybe they have a chance to beat an Urban Meyer team. But Ohio State, man, they're gritty. I would have them pulling it out, honestly, in that game. I'd have Ohio State and Florida State in the final, probably with Ohio State beating them, take care of business in the championship because of their defense.
Yeah, I first and foremost wanted to thank you guys for having me on.
Oh, stop and blushing.
Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, you'll be on many more times.
So, yeah, and I hope to contribute a little bit more often. But going into Travis's picks, yeah, I tend to agree. These are definitely intriguing matchups at best to have Bama pitted against Ohio State. Ohio State got the best of Bama the last time they played them in the college football playoff. Pretty much shocked the world in an offensive route. I understand they are different teams now, but Urban Meyer does tend to step up on these big games. I mean, it's why they're constantly on the national stage and constantly in these conversations. So, it's really going to be a good matchup. I can't say either way that one's team's going to be favored too heavily. Based off of how Ohio State plays this year, I think if they slide into the college football playoff, that means that they've beaten good teams this year in Michigan and Penn State, and I think they could have a legitimate opportunity to beat Bama. FSU and Oklahoma State, I like the pick with Oklahoma State. I think that they have an opportunity to really present themselves in the Big 12 this year and show off. They have a good core of people returning last year from the good year that they had. I really like Gundy over there. I think that he's going to be – I think he is a great coach personally, and he does well with what he can get, being the second fiddle to the Oklahoma, in that state. To be able to pull recruits from that area is not always easy. So to be able to pull out a Mason Rudolph and see him perform well, I think it'd make a good game. However, FSU's defense is very good. It would be very hard for an offense in the Big 12 to pit against a defense like FSU or Bama, and I would see FSU pulling that one off. So.
Yeah, and I tend to agree with your recruiting thing. The mullet can't hurt Gundy. I think it's one of the best decisions he's come with. He's getting him a lot of notoriety, and that can only help the program.
It's beautiful.
Yes.
Better than Danny's mullet.
So in your final, then, who would you have coming out on top?
I would have to go with Ohio State, FSU, just because I don't want to see the rematch of Bama FSU. I don't. But going based off of Travis's predictions here, right?
Yep.
An Ohio State FSU rematch or an Ohio State FSU matchup would definitely be intriguing. I could see Ohio State pulling it out in the regards of their defense of line is really good. If Francois struggled a lot last year, their offensive line struggled last year in protecting Francois, so it's going to be a huge test for FSU this year to see if their offensive line improved. If they didn't, it's going to be a long day for Francois against Ohio State, and if they did, then they may have a lot better opportunity to pull it out.
Yeah, I like again what you said about Urban Meyer against Nick Saban's Bama team a couple of years ago. He's no stranger to Nick Saban in Alabama, so he does come ready to play. All right, next we'll move on to Frank's predictions. Frank's got some interesting ones here. He's got
very interesting.
He's got. I mean, a lot of these are similar. I mean, if we take a look at it here, 4 of us have FSU. It looks like 4 of us have Bama. We all have a Big Ten team in there, and we kind of differ on who's going to miss out between the Pac-12 and the Big 12. But for Frank, he's got the LSU Tigers in there. I can only assume they're going to be the 4 seed. And then you got Penn State, USC, and FSU.
Wow.
So we've got 3 great quarterbacks and then LSU in here. I don't know who his seeding would be. But just for conversation, let's say that USC is his 1, FSU and Penn State are his 2, 3, and LSU's his 4. So the matchups are USC, LSU, and FSU, Penn State. For me, I don't think LSU should be in here. Just in my opinion.
You think LSU should?
No, I don't think LSU should. That's my thought. But, you never know with Darius Geis. He did absolutely dominate the scene last year, even with Fournette on his team.
This would be a crazy season if you picture a world where USC is in the playoffs, LSU wins the SEC championship, and Penn State takes over all in the same.
I mean, everybody loves an upset.
Yeah.
But for me, I like the Florida State pick. We've talked a lot about them today already. USC, Sam Darnold, obviously if they get this far, they're probably on a roll like they were last year when they tore off 9 or 10 in a row to end the year. Penn State's got Barkley and McSorley. That offense is going to be high-powered. It'd be fun to watch them go up against each other. I know Travis had them in a Rose Bowl matchup, a New Year's Six Bowl matchup, after neither of them get into his playoff. But I'd want to see that matchup again. It was such a great game last year. I'd have to take USC on top, obviously. I don't think Penn State makes it this far. I had USC over LSU making it to the championship. It's not my favorite pick, but when you're given these options. I've also got Florida State beating Penn State. I don't think Penn State's offense is going to be that effective all year, and I think their defense is going to give up a ton of points. So then in my final, I've got USC and FSU. I think I would have to take FSU. Not to be too much of a homer, but Sam Darnold really is a lot of USC's offense, and if you can shut him down, they have to rely on Ronald Jones II. I'm not sure that he can get it done on that scale. So I'd have to go with FSU in this scenario.
So for me, I might have a different outcome. If LSU is at this point, it's got to be because they just had some kind of crazy season and they're doing really good. I don't think they're going to get like a bunch of lucky games to make it this far. Again, that means they would have had to have beaten Bama. They would have had to beaten the SEC East to get this far, right?
Yeah, and not to tear you apart, Frank. Just LSU, anybody not picking Bama, we got to have a little fun with that. But continue on.
Yeah, so in this guy's coma, Frank's coma, where he sees this happening.
Right.
LSU must be really good if they make it this far. That being said, you have a really good SEC team in LSU versus USC, which is a Pac-12 team. I don't see Pac-12. They don't have the size. I don't think they have the strength. And I don't think they can compete with that good of a SEC team if they're there. So I think LSU wins if they made it that far. And for Penn State and FSU, I think that's a good game. I would say FSU takes that one. Like I said, I think Penn State McSoars their way up to this point, but I don't know if they can take on FSU's defense, and I think the offense will take it down. So FSU, LSU in the national championship, wouldn't that be an interesting game?
Yeah,
I'd watch it.
I mean, it's 2 storied programs.
Yeah, I don't like to say it, but I mean it's the the shining year of two turds, I guess, in my opinion, since I'm a Florida fan.
Yeah, it's not looking great for your season.
No, I don't like FSU. I dislike FSU more than I dislike LSU. So this pains me, but I think FSU wins that one. They take the national championship.
Yeah, what you got, John?
I'd have to, first and foremost, I got to apologize to my wife for me giving this analysis and siding with teams that she would.
Don't forget your daughter. She's not going to look at you the same way.
Me for. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, my daughter listening to this.
Grace is going to turn to Derek.
We have, LSU and FSU. I like what Jake said to this point is if LSU is in this conversation here and they're in the college football playoff, they're a lot better than people are expecting. They've powered through Florida. They've powered through Bama. They've beaten Auburn. And even if they lose one of those games, they would had to have won the other two. That being said, you're going to have to run the table. So winning in the Iron Bowl, you're not going to get in the college football playoff losing the Iron Bowl because it's probably going to determine who's going to go to.
The SEC West.
Yeah, the SEC West. But if Bama loses the Iron Bowl and LSU squeaks in here, there's a good opportunity for them, and it shows that their defense is really that legitimate, and Darius Geis really is a good Heisman candidate. I would side with LSU in this case, and because I don't think that FSU is going to see a defense like that if LSU is in the Final Four all season, and that's Florida included. If they're in this conversation, that I think that they've definitely shown to be the superior team in that regard. Penn State, USC.
You got them flip flopped. Penn State, FSU.
I completely that entire thing up.
No, keep going. Let it ride.
You're fine.
It really doesn't matter. This is never going to happen, Frank. This matchup, it doesn't matter. We can call whatever seed you want.
Penn State, USC. I like this matchup. I think it would be interesting. I think USC would come out on top with that.
Mm-hmm.
USC, LSU in the final. Again, I don't think USC would see a defense like LSU's all year. It would definitely make for probably a pretty low scoring game. And if it does go low scoring, I give advantage to LSU in that because I don't think USC would
solid
have
17-10 type of game.
Would have that route. So
mark it down. Joe Campmore underestimating those ACC defenses of Clemson, NC State, and all year.
Danny's doing a Butch Jones after you heard that one.
We'll see what's going
Basically
on.
Basically a little red, man.
All right, now we just have our three left. Obviously, it'll be a little easier to remember the seeds for these. We'll go ahead and start with my own. I've got Ohio State as the 1 seed. I'm going to put Bama as the 2, FSU as the 3. And then I have the winner of USC-Washington at 4, but I've already said that is going to be USC. So I've got an Ohio State-USC matchup in the first, in the one of these two semifinals. I've got to take Ohio State. That defense, to me, it's gonna be good enough to beat teams, and the offense is going to score at least 20, 30 points a game, no problem. So I've got to take them over USC. I worry that they're not going to have this darling season that everybody is predicting. I think Darnold does perform as well or better than he did last year. I just don't think the pieces around him are as good. And then FSU-Bama, you have a rematch of Week 1. I think Bama wins the first time around. I think FSU takes it the second time around. I just think that the adjustments that Jimbo Fisher makes in between games and throughout the whole season are going to be enough to put them over the top in the playoff. Then again, I've got an Ohio State-FSU final, which I've already said I think Ohio State would take. And that's really all I've got for mine.
Yeah, it does create an interesting matchup here. You have the rematch of FSU and Bama in the semifinals.
Right.
And again, it would be interesting to see how the first game of the season versus where they are at the end of the season would play. I think it would be two different games completely. I think you'd see the offenses and defenses taking a completely different route. And I favor Bama in this game again. Even if Bama wins the first game, I think Bama has the defense to stop Francois. And even if FSU finds the identity by the end of the year on offense and is reestablishing a new running back to replace Dalvin, then I think if they come through with a good running game again, then they could present the possibility of beating Bama. But I'm going to side with them on this. I think Ohio State, whether they play Washington or USC, is going to win that game. Meyer knows how to win at the big stage. And then, of course, you present an Ohio State-Bama scenario again. I'm not going to contradict myself from a prior prediction. I'm going to have to go with Ohio State again. But it is certainly an interesting Final Four there.
Yeah, move on. Jake, let's go through yours next.
Yeah, and to keep things interesting, because I had Washington or Stanford as one of them, as the fourth. Was the third, rather. So I'm going to have Bama and FSU up against Penn State, and I'm just going to say Stanford just to make it fun. So just keep in mind Stanford has made it thus far.
So do you have Bama and FSU in the first game in a semifinal, or do you have them on separate sides of the bracket?
Actually, I would probably imagine with those four teams that Bama would be 1, FSU would be 2, Penn State 3, and Stanford 4. Okay. So it would be Bama versus Stanford, and then Penn State versus FSU.
Good luck, David Shaw.
Yeah. David Shaw is... Though he does have a lot of love for Christ, his Lord and Savior, I don't think Stanford can stand with Bama. Kind of like what I said before, I don't see a Pac-12 team being able to handle a defense from the SEC. So Bama would win for sure. Penn State, FSU, I think we've talked about this already. FSU would just win that one out. And so we have, again, a Bama-FSU matchup, which once again, if FSU wins the first game, I think that Bama would win again. If Bama wins the first game, then I think it's a toss-up in the championship, but Jimbo can definitely pull out a win after making some adjustments. So yeah, I'll
stick with your guns.
Yeah, I'll go with Bama.
All right.
I like this scenario here that you said with FSU and Penn State. Because it's a rematch from the Orange Bowl, the Bowden Joe Pa, of old when they went into like 4 overtimes and had to keep missing field goals, and I'm sure
points,
it was the Penn State and FSU fans' heart ache just every overtime. But nice, completely different teams, new coaches that have shown that they can have success on the big stage. I think FSU would win in this case, although I do applaud Penn State, and if they do make it to this point, they've won some games that prove their worth. However, I think FSU, quality-wise, has a better all-around team than Penn State. And I hate saying that, but I have to, you have to show the facts here. I mean, I just don't see the Big Ten team. Yeah, I don't see the Big Ten team taking on and beating FSU like that. Bama, Stanford,
Stanford could do it.
Jake,
I don't know what world you're living in over there.
Hey, those trees are fearful.
For one, there's no way Stanford makes it to the Final Four. We laughed at Frank about LSU. We should be completely kicking you out of the room right now for the Stanford.
I'm staying right here in the studio.
All right.
I applaud Stanford for getting to this point, and obviously if they make it to here, they've beaten Washington, they've beaten USC, but just in any case, on any of our other predictions, I don't see a Pac-12 team beating a top-tier Big Ten or ACC or SEC school, and I don't see Stanford pulling it off this year. You got new players coming in, maybe in another year or two, they get more experience, then maybe it's a different conversation, but you got to see how this year is going to play out for them. And to give a preseason prediction that Stanford could upset Bama is a little too far-fetched in my opinion. I'm going to play it more safe here and go with
You'd be
Bama.
a madman.
Right. I mean, we love the prediction game. That's why we're doing this whole show. So
Exactly.
it's fun. It's fun to imagine the scenarios, and all odds this will all get blown up in week 3 or week 4. So
drop a comment below if you think that Stanford can upset Bama.
Yeah.
there's your plug. All right, Joe, we're coming right back to you. We got your 4 here. Tell us your seeding.
So I have Bama, USC, Oklahoma, and Penn State, and I would go in that order. Bama 1 against Penn State at 4, USC at 2, and Oklahoma at 3. And I like Oklahoma here. I wanted to throw in something new, kind of like what Travis did. I don't like that Bob Stoops left. It kind of hurts my prediction here a little bit, but Baker Mayfield is a very good quarterback, and I like his gameplay. I like his toughness. And I think if they can get past Oklahoma State twice, and they go 11-1, that they can squeeze into the college football playoff.
Yeah, and they have the opportunity to get reamed in the playoffs.
If your prediction comes true, Bob Stoops is going to be so mad.
Oh yeah, about it.
So mad.
That he leaves
Baker
his team,
Mayfield
yeah.
senior year, and then he leads into the playoff.
Yeah.
After all that talk of Bob can't win the big game type stuff.
Exactly.
Oh man.
But USC Oklahoma, I think that's where it stops.
Okay.
I think USC could beat Oklahoma. I don't think Oklahoma's defense could stop Sam Darnold, and I think they're just going to throw all over them, and I don't think Oklahoma's offense could keep up. I think USC's defense is just good enough to keep them from outscoring them, USC. So I'd have USC in the final there. Bama, Penn State. Penn State again. If they made it to this point, I think it's a good testament to how good this team is. I don't think they're final quality against any of these other three teams. So it'd be a Bama USC final for me, and that poses an interesting matchup. I like Sam Darnold. I do think that he's maybe a good future NFL quarterback, and playing Bama's defense would be a great testament to that, to how he could be. But I think Bama comes out on top in that matchup.
All right, Jake, let us know what you're thinking about this Bama, Penn State, and USC Oklahoma matchup here.
Yeah. So, if, by the way, you said you don't see Penn State ever going up against the finals, going up against any of these guys. I think if Oklahoma and Penn State played each other somehow, I think Penn State would beat Oklahoma. That's a moot point. So Bama would crush Oklahoma. I don't think they should be there. I think, kind of like what we talked about before, if Oklahoma is...
Bama's playing Penn State in this scenario.
Dadgummit.
I know, it gets a little confusing.
So USC, Oklahoma. Still same reasoning. I think if Oklahoma makes it to this point, like we talked about earlier, if Oklahoma gets this far, I think that the playoffs kind of fell in their lap. Right. So I don't think they've really earned this if they got it to this point. So I think they would lose to USC. That being said, USC was probably, does live up to the hype. Like I said, I think they're going to be the big bust of this season. But if they made it this far, it's because they were able to surpass the self-destruction that the Pac-12 could definitely do this year, surviving Stanford, Washington State, all those teams. So USC will put up a good game and win, and then Bama, Penn State. If Penn State's beating Ohio State, I think the reason why Ohio State beats Bama ever is because it's Urban Meyer. But, if they're proven to be better than Ohio State and they've made it this far, I've already said Bama all these other times, so just for funsies, I'm going to say Penn State wins somehow. And then we have USC, Penn State. That is a national championship that I might not watch.
It was an incredible game last year, man.
Rematch in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, it was an incredible game last year. Penn State was up 3 scores in the fourth quarter. USC comes firing back, ends up winning like 52-49. I think the final
it was.
Yeah, but so I'd obviously end up watching it just for the sake of this podcast, nothing else. But I think if Penn State and USC came to this matchup, I still think Penn State wins it all. So Penn State sees a national championship. That'd be interesting.
That would be very interesting. Obviously, these are all predictions. Like we said, we're very high on the SEC champion as long as it's Bama. The Big Ten champion, be it Ohio State, Penn State, and then Florida State out of the ACC. I'm surprised I didn't see any Clemsons in here, but a lot of people it appears, at least in our group, are thinking that if FSU does not make the playoff, then it probably will be nobody from the ACC. I don't think everybody's high on Clemson this year. Moving on from the playoff predictions, now that we've got all of that out of the way.
Yeah, we'd like to make Joe feel useful since he's made the trip out here, wanted to listen to this. So we gave him his own segment, gave him a pencil and some paper and said, hey, why don't you just write down 25 teams for us? 25 best teams. And he broke it down. Don't worry, we're not going to spend an hour talking about each team in depth. But Joe, take it away. Who's your top 25?
So I'll start from 25 and work in. We won't do anything too crazy. I just want to breeze through here. I went based off of the coaches poll and then kind of made my comparisons to see where it differed. So at number 25 is where the first change happens. I have Washington State in at 25. The coaches poll doesn't have them ranked. They have Tennessee at 24, and I have them dropped out. I just like Washington State. I think that they tapered off last season, but they deserve a little bit more love. I like what you talked about earlier about Luke Falk. I mean, his passing efficiency is untapped. I mean, to complete 70% of your passes, even at the college level, is unheard of, and especially when you're throwing for almost 4,500 yards. Again, I don't think that he ends up in the Heisman race, like you said, because in an air raid offense, if you are going 8-4, it's not going to bode well for you. But I do like Washington State. I think they deserve a little bit more love, at least to start the year, give them an opportunity to prove both ways. And so that's why I have them at 25. I got Utah up at 24. Texas at 23. I think this is a good spot for Texas because they have to prove themselves. They're going to have their opportunities to move up in the rankings. And I like Tom Herman. I think he did well over at Houston, and it'll be interesting to see how he does in the first year at Texas.
I will say that's a bold pick. So a lot of people are picking Texas to do better than they did last year, but having a team that I believe won 5 games in the regular season last year up in the top 25, that is bold.
Virginia Tech at 22. I know you guys talked about Virginia Tech a little bit earlier, coming out of the Coastal. Virginia Tech is a team you always have to watch, even after Frank Beamer left. They did a good job. Their replacement head coach, he's done well over there, and they're always going to be a threat. I don't see them being a top 10 team, but I like them there at 22. USF at 21.
Go Bulls.
Go Bulls, right? It's my alma mater. They're actually this is actually the first year, and that that had nothing to do with my top 25, but it's the first time ever that 4 Florida teams are in the top 25 to start the season. So I thought that was an interesting stat. And it's good representation of Florida and what talent that we can pull to this state. And I like USF at 21. I think it's great for the program. I like Charlie Strong. I love that hire. I think it's going to help their defense out tremendously. Obviously, Quentin Flowers is a freak. He can do it all. His numbers are staggering, and they even competed with Lamar Jackson, who won the Heisman last year. Different caliber talent that he went up against, but I certainly think that he needs to be in the conversation. People need to keep an eye on him. Kansas State at 20. Then I got West Virginia with Will Grier coming in this year. It'll be interesting to see how they do. Miami at 18, Louisville at 17, Gators at 16.
How mad, just a quick question here, how mad are Florida fans going to be if Will Grier goes to West Virginia and leads them to a Big 12 championship or something insane? Yeah, he put up great numbers at Florida, and then he had his problems, obviously, but that one's got to sting a little bit if they let him get away, and then he goes to West Virginia and puts up a light show.
Dude, he didn't know about the PED, all right?
The thing is about him is I have no hard feelings towards Will Grier. I thought he was a really good quarterback at Florida. He didn't leave because he lost his starting job. He didn't like how it was handled. I personally think McElwain was put between a rock and a hard place with dealing with this situation. To tell him he's not going to be guaranteed a spot, or to tell him he is guaranteed a spot, I don't think it's there's a no-win situation there. The kid's either going to be you're either going to piss off the kid or you're going to piss off the team when you're guaranteeing somebody that's suspended for a year in that regard. So I do wish him luck. I'm going to follow along with Grier. I hope he does well. Georgia at 15. I hate to see Florida behind Georgia there, but they have their quarterback answered. They know who their starter is, and I think that's a big reason why Georgia's ahead of Florida in the preseason rankings. Stanford at 14. Auburn at 13. LSU at 12. LSU Auburn there. They're going to be an interesting team. A couple teams to watch out of the West this year. Wisconsin, I actually have them at 11. The coaches poll has them at 10. I just don't. Their strength of schedule to me, it just does not.
That schedule is so bad.
It's ridiculous.
It's so bad. But I mean, if they start the season at 11, you're gonna see them in the top 5 at some point. I can't see them losing before Michigan, and that's even late on in the season. So 8-0, 9-0 looks
well, and the coaches are going to love them. The coaches poll's going to love them because they're going to go 8 or 9-0, like you said. And but what's going to hurt them is they're going to be 9-0, and when the college football playoff poll comes out, they're going to be ranked 9th or 10th.
Right.
You know, they are a Big Ten team, so they're going to get some love, but that strength of schedule is going to really hurt them.
If you're shaking your head now, just wait till you get to number 9.
I see it.
Michigan at number 10, I have them down from 9. And big point to what you said is they lost so many seniors last year. There's a lot of questions, which, you know, you can put them in the top 10 because Harbaugh is a good coach, and
that's the only reason why they're up there.
I think they're going to be, I think they're going to be solid no matter what, but too many questions to have them higher than that. I have Oklahoma State at 9. I think that they're the fact that they're returning 2 wide receivers that had over 70 receptions last year, they're returning their running back who ran for over 1,000 yards, and a quarterback Mason Rudolph. I mean, he's in the Heisman conversation. He's a kid that's got a lot of talent, and I think he's going to help them win a bunch of ball games this year.
Yeah, well, just one quick note on that their leading receiver James Washington. He would be the only receiver I would take this year as a Heisman possibility as a receiver. Wide receivers typically don't win it, especially in air raid offenses. But his numbers are going to be absolutely ridiculous this year. He's extremely talented. I would say probably a first-round pick next year in the draft.
And I mean, even last year, 71 receptions, 1,380 yards as a receiver. I mean, over 1,000 yards is ridiculous. To have 1,300, almost 1,400 yards is insane. Moving along, Oklahoma at 8. I think they're going to be a team that they're solid all around, and I think you put them up there and make them prove you wrong. I think they're going to be in that top 10 conversation for a while, unless they lose a bad game. Washington at 7. After the year they had last year, they're deserving of the top 10. I got USC at 6. Mainly because of the 2 teams in front of them. I think that they deserve a little bit more love than USC. I got Penn State at 5. I have Penn State in front of USC here because of who Penn State has returning. Their core receivers, running back, tight end, and quarterback are all coming back. I think it's going to be a good boost for them, and so that's why they're in my top 5. Clemson, I got Clemson at 4. You have to give Clemson the love. They're the reigning national champs. I haven't really talked about them at all, but make them prove us wrong, right? I mean, they got questions at quarterback, but we'll know pretty early on if they're deserving of being in the top 5 or not.
Yeah, they get Auburn early. I agree that you gotta see what they got before you move them down too far, but I agree that they can't really hold on to the number 1 spot when you lose all that talent on that offensive side of the ball. You lose the best quarterback in program history, Deshaun Watson. You lose Wayne Gallman, who was a great running back for them, and Mike Williams, who was one of their better receivers.
Exactly. So you're rebuilding on a lot of very important fronts.
Right.
So I got Florida State at 3. I mean, Francois showed his toughness last year. I give the kid a lot of credit. They did lose Dalvin Cook, so they're going to have to prove themselves early on as well, especially against Bama week 1.
Yeah, defensive side of the ball gets a big test.
Right, exactly. So, and then I got Ohio State at 2. Ohio State's always going to be solid. Meyer's always going to bring it. I mean, JT Barrett's there for his 16th year at Ohio State, so he's got a lot of experience, a lot of game experience there. So I like Ohio State at 2, and they'll probably be in that top 5 conversation all season long. And then Bama at 1. Bama is just, they replenish. I mean, they're Alabama. They replenish just as quickly as they lose people to the draft.
Let me just say, as a Florida State fan, I am so sick of that phrase. It's Bama. Oh, it's just Bama. Because Bama. I hate it.
As Florida fans, we don't like it either.
Yeah, we're not exactly used to it. Yeah, we're not exactly keen to it either.
I can't wait till that reign is over. I mean, Saban will probably coach there until he's 80, but
scratch that.
I just hope the talent. I hope the talent wanes there in the future. I hope they have a couple bad recruiting years, and I hope that they let some other kids play at the top for a while.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice. But, even though they lost last year, the way they lost the last second, Clemson came back. I mean, they're still a solid team. And they return a sophomore quarterback, a junior running back. I mean, they have the tools, again, to make another run this year. So that's why they're my top team.
Yeah, so there you have it. That is Joe Campmore's top 25 for the season. Like you said, it's pretty similar to Coach's Poll. He made a few minor adjustments here and there. But it's a good list overall. I mean, there's no glaring omissions for me.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, thanks
for having me, guys.
For coming on. Now we're gonna end this podcast. We've run a little long today. We're gonna try and narrow it down.
That's okay. You guys are loving it. You know it.
Yeah, I mean it is a special preview show. We're not gonna do this all the time, so we'll get it under control a little bit. A few technical difficulties here and there today, but we'll get that cut out. And moving forward, we'll put together a better product, and we'll keep progressing each week.
Stop rambling. You're hurting the situation.
Okay. And we might get rid of the main host as well. That's undecided. But we're
Job security.
We're gonna end the night here. I'm gonna go through some Heisman hopefuls before we close it out for the evening. I've really only got 6 I want to talk about, maybe 7. I've got a long list here of potentials, but these are the ones that really stood out to me. You got Jake Browning, quarterback at Washington. Last year he completed 62% of his passes, 3,430 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, which are astounding passing numbers. I know they threw the ball a lot last year, but they also had Myles Gaskin, who ran for a lot of yards. Browning only had 4 rushing TDs last year. You would think that he uses his legs a little bit more this year, but I still think he could throw for upwards of 35 touchdowns. Right there in the Heisman race. He's probably going to be in all of the preseason watch lists. You got Sam Darnold, of course. Everybody's in love with him after last year. We got Saquon Barkley. This is Travis's favorite for this year. 1,500 yards rushing last year, 18 touchdowns, 5.5 yards per carry, and he also caught 4 touchdowns in 14 games. So he averaged a little over 100 a game, more than a touchdown a game. A dominant force in college football. He's probably going to be the top running back when you look at it this year. Maybe the only person to give him a run for his money is Darius Geis. But I think it could be a year for a running back to win the Heisman. Next up, we got Baker Mayfield at Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield's going up against weak defenses again this year. He probably throws for at least 65% completion percentage. I can't say that he's going to break his own record 2 years in a row. But 40 touchdowns is well within the realm of possibility, which will get him to New York for the Heisman ceremony. Lamar Jackson now, reigning Heisman winner. 56% completion percentage. I don't think you should win a Heisman with that low completion percentage. You are a quarterback at that point, but that's not good. 56%, that will not get you a job in the NFL. 3,500 yards passing, 30 touchdowns through the air, 9 interceptions. He did, however, run for 1,571 yards and 21 rushing TDs. So the 21 rushing TDs is a little bit crazy. I think that number drops a little bit this year.
Those passing stats, it sounds like he's just a running back throwing the ball.
Yeah, he did throw for 30 last year. His accuracy numbers obviously need to improve if he's going to repeat or if the team's going to do even nearly as well as they did last year. I do expect the interceptions to go up a little bit, as I don't think he's going to be able to run as efficiently, and he's going to have to throw the ball more this year. But then we've got our last one, Darius Geis, running back at LSU. He ran for 1,387 yards, 15 touchdowns, and he had 1 receiving touchdown in 12 games last year. He only had 8 games, however, with more than 5 carries. So with only 8 games with more than 5 carries, running for 1,387 yards, he was well over 150 yards a game last year in those 8 games. And his yards per carry, 7.6. Those are Reggie Bush type numbers. I know they're not quite as high as Reggie's was in his fantastic year at USC when they won the national championship. But Darius Geis, he could lead this team to an SEC West championship. He needs a lot of things to fall into place around him. He's got to work on catching the ball out of the backfield. But if he can run for 150 yards a game, as he did in most of his games last year, he could be sitting at 1,800 yards, maybe 18 touchdowns, and I think that'll win him the Heisman if he can get there.
They could at least get him to a playoffs.
Yeah, well
if you're frank.
Yeah, we'll see. He needs a quarterback to get him there, but. Yeah, we've got some great candidates this year. I've got to give it to Saquon Barkley or Baker Mayfield. I think it's just Baker Mayfield's year. If he can even come close to what he did last year, Lamar Jackson's going to dip. Darnold, I think, will do around what he did last year. Jake Browning threw for a lot of touchdowns. I don't know if he's going to average almost 3 or over 3 touchdowns a game like he did last year. I got to imagine that with a lot of people picking Penn State to make the playoff, Saquon Barkley gets there, gets to New York, and probably wins the Heisman if they can make it to the playoff. If not, I got to give it to Baker Mayfield, even if they don't make the playoff. I think the dude's going to have a fantastic year. I think we've had a good show. Jake, if you have any final thoughts, just want to say it's been fun getting the first one out of the way. We're going to learn from this and we'll keep moving forward. We'll start a weekly show, if I'm correct. Starting next week, and we'll get more into all of the other sports. This was specifically for college football, obviously.
Yeah, if you're not a huge fan of college football, A, you don't need to be listening to this anymore. But B, we'll have more sports in the future if you still want to try and give us a chance. A little more structure, probably starting next week. We're going to have some different sports that we talk about, different segments, talks, probably a little more structured debate gates. We'll talk about fantasy. So we'll give you a lot more detail and a lot more sports, but we just thought we've missed football for so long. We just wanted to give the proper praise to the NCAA. For whatever this is on, could be YouTube, could be Facebook. Drop comments on what you think. If you have feedback for us about what you want to hear, or maybe something that we could do, definitely open ears. So thanks for listening. If you made it this far, look forward to talking to you guys next week. Probably look for a 30 to 45 minute episode next week. This one went on a little bit longer, but hey, that's what specials are for, right? Yeah. Game of Thrones can run longer if they want to, so why can't we?
Right. That's right.
So for Backyard Sportscast, I'm Jacob, Dirty Jake. Get Danny, or if you want to call him DJ Dub, he'll be completely okay with that. And Joe, the man with no nickname.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are we out?